I had been doing shows for a little bit, and we used to name our shows, like, so, like, we had Punks Against Racism, um, which who knew there were gonna be 20 editions of it, and, I remember we had a show called, like, Frankie Latino's Day Back. We had a show called Organized Chaos, which was a really good show. We had I can't remember all of the names of all of the shows, but we used to name our shows, but I never put like any type of like I never had my name on it or like and this is before we formalized underscore as a thing, um, and like it wasn't necessarily like a conscious thing. Like my first show was March of '99, and then I was like, "Oh, I really liked doing that," and then I didn't figure out how to do it again until September of '99 was my second show, which Maryland's Vitamins also played at and Spinecracker played, and then my third show was Organized Chaos, which I think Maryland's Vitamins also played at and was like their second last show, and then that was November of '99, and then I think the next one was like February, but we were kind of just developing without realizing it, like building sustainability into what we were doing. I thought, oh, like a lot of other people who run shows like have a name for the company that they run shows under. And I was like, I haven't been putting my name on anything for the last since I started. So I think that might have been, like I started in March '99. I think this might have been oh, maybe it was when we booked Leftover Crack, or did we book oh, no, we booked King Django twice, so it was the first time I booked King Django, so it's probably a year and a half later. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I should probably put a name on this." So, like, well, what's, like, a name for, like, no name? And so I called it underscore because, like, there's really nothing above the line of an underscore,
Yeah.
and I thought that was the closest way to not have a name that was, like, that meant not really anything. Uh So that was my thought process at the time. So I started to get to know the people at the youth center, and they were kind of doing 4 shows a year. And as I started really realizing that I liked doing this, we got to a place where between the youth center and there would be a show every month. So the youth center, because it was run by the town of Newmarket, knew their schedule far enough ahead to be able to tell me which months they were doing shows. So I didn't do shows on those months. I did shows on the other months. And then Christian, who ran the shows at the youth center, was a big guy, and he would come and do security at my shows. And then I would go to his shows and kind of stage manage and keep the show on time. So that was my first kind of experience stage managing someone else's
Yeah.
thing.
You guys were kind of like trading your specific talents.
Yeah, yeah, which was kind of cool. And same thing. Like if the youth center had a show in May and I had a show in June, whether it was at the Optimus Hall, or the Spotlight, or wherever it was, um, like it was fine for me to promote my shows at the youth center for what was upcoming. And of course, like if my show is in March and the youth center show is in April, we were promoting their show at my show because we were just like focused on the scene, right? Like the shows earned enough money to cover the costs, right? Like they basically ran at a break even. There wasn't a ton of profit. There was a little bit more when we started pulling like 400 people consistently month over month, but I always worked. So like this was my fun thing. So if there was more money, typically once the costs were covered, like the bands on that show would get a little bit more,
Yeah, of course.
I wasn't really putting much like at all into my own pocket. Well, I don't know how it works in other local scenes because I don't think a lot of people kind of had this experience
Mhm.
that um but like I can't tell you how many times certain bands were like, oh yeah, just pay us gas or don't pay us or whatever, and then when we had the funds we would top those bands up and
Yeah.
make sure things were spread around, but they also knew that like I wasn't I wasn't doing this as my career. It wasn't my business. I could see it was about scene building and community, and so I think it does like give a different experience and atmosphere. Like I do really feel like it's a community of people,
Yeah.
and like and it is network building and community building. When I went to my first um, when I did my first post-secondary program in music business, I met my friend Adam Clark, who was doing the production engineering program. Well, Adam played in Shag, who played at the first show that I went to, and wound up becoming my live sound engineer for Underscore shows for years. And he taught Fraser how to do live sound, and then Fraser became my sound engineer for years. So um, you never really know. It's like like I didn't know Ed from the Heat Scores that well when they first started playing for me. I knew other guys in the band, and then through working together at Bose, like we definitely got to know each other over the years. Um, you know, we became good friends, and he wound up designing some of the later Punks Against Racism posters and the big annual thing, and even his band Give Up played a couple years ago. Like it's so it's always really, you never know who you're going to, like you never know people that you meet at any stage where they're going to come back around. So but so many different people had a different influence on the experience, whether they were on the stage in a band, whether they were part of producing the show, whether they helped promote it, whether they did a flyer, whether they handed out a flyer. Like so many bands in the early days, um, like the way to get the word out was by handing out flyers. And we didn't have social media when I started running shows. It's kind of crazy because it's so part of every day, and that makes me feel really old to say that. But like when we were saying we had to figure out where people hung out, like if you went to the food court at the mall, there were probably some punks there, smoking cigarettes, and they would want to go to the show. But bands were in school, and if you booked enough bands from enough different schools and handed every one of those bands a packet of flyers, a lot of people were going to come if that band was really serious about having a good audience and promoting the show. So like that adds to the experience because people were willing to take their time to take that packet and go out and hand out the flyers, right?
Yeah.
So like so many different people played different roles, selling the snacks, helping me clean up after, to make sure that the venue was presentable for whoever we rented it from. Like people didn't always want to rent a venue to a teenager, with a mohawk, like so we really had to make sure that those places were the way they were when we left,
Yeah.
as when we got there. So many people played a part in doing all of the different jobs that need to happen to make a show run. Like Meg doing all of the doors for years. Like my parents did the doors for years before that. Like you need to have people that you can trust to do certain jobs, um, yeah, so it really, like the way we did it was really a community type effort. I kind of promoting was always something, and organizing shows was something that I did as a hobby. It has never earned me um like a steady income, and I never approached it in a way that would allow for that. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't pushing myself to be the top promoter. I wasn't investing to bring in the top bands. When I was younger, it was like my hobby to do, all the way through high school. And then it developed into something where I after when I did post-secondary, I pursued like music business, and I thought, no, I like the event, so how do I continue doing events? And through connections that I made in the scene, through the Underground Operations label, which guys from Maryland's Vitamins wound up in bands on that label, and in working with and booking their bands, I received an opportunity to stage manage at Wakestock one year. So, more stage managing happened, and then I liked being at festivals, and I started to pursue event management more than like music industry business management, but things that would still have a music or an entertainment component. So I wound up being involved in music festivals for a long time and worked all the different types of jobs, from stage manager to site logistics and operations to eventually like directing and producing festivals. So and my last kind of festival job went through 2019, where I was working at Bose at the Oktoberfest, and in my first year in 2015, I booked both the Flatliners and the Elwins, so which was super cool. So we were getting anywhere between 17 and 20,000 people at this festival every year. So, and it had that pedigree before I came to it, but it was really cool to be able to bring bands that, I had known since their early days, who had gone on to their own careers, and be able to bring them to the, my current place of work at the time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is super fun. So, and I think that the skills that I learned doing everything on a show, like we were making our own flyers and putting them, like we had the thought process of, okay, well, where do we put these flyers? Okay, well, where do the people who go to our shows hang out? Right? Like that's marketing.
Yeah.
We didn't know that we were marketing, but we were learning that skill, right?
Yeah.
I was doing all of the negotiations with the talent, all of the booking, all of the venue booking. I was hiring security. I was hiring production people. We were figuring out how to monetize snacks, like the snack bar, so that we could earn additional revenue, so that we weren't just getting revenue off of our tickets. We were planning for our promotion cycle far enough ahead that if we had a show in March, that we were ready to promote April's show at our show in March. We were building and developing bands from opening acts to local headliners. And all of those skills have served me as I have done other events and other projects, through my whole career. I got together with some friends and we formed this thing called Northtown Music and Art Wars, which we ran for 3 years. And it was a way to find new bands, of all genres, and both like people in the 19 plus and people in the all ages scene. And this is kind of after Tomboos was done and sold and no longer a thing. And there was a bit of a dry spell, and like, who's playing music? There were still bands that I knew that existed, but it took a while to find a venue again. We started doing all ages shows at the Jam Spot and 19 plus shows at the Lion and the Firkin. And so doing this, like, I remembered there was a battle of the bands leading up to the year 2000 that the town had run, and the winners played with Trouble Charger and Sum 41, and Ruckus were on that. I know the Heat Scores were in that battle. A bunch of the bands that I mentioned from the early days were in that battle. I judged one of the things I was invited to judge, and I remember that like really felt like it was a thing that helped kickstart and reinvigorate the scene, because it wasn't about genre, it was just about local bands. So you're getting a ton of cross-pollination of people who might be into punk, seeing some hardcore bands, seeing some ska bands, seeing some rock bands, whatever it was. So I wanted to try and recreate that feeling with Northtown, and it really like helped kickstart the scene again, there were a bunch of all ages bands and all ages shows, and then there were a bunch of 19 plus bands, to the point that shortly after that, like we ran it for 3 years, and I was able to run a show every weekend of a different genre. So I could do a monthly punk show. Enough hip hop bands that were from the area came out that I could do a hip hop show every 2 months. There were enough like kind of folk, and indie bands that we could do a show like that every month. And so it was really cool because we were able to like start to do different genre based shows, and then still like kind of cross pollinate a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was even booking a monthly comedy show like just before I moved out of town. So it really like, you kind of have to pay attention to what's going on in the scene, but also create opportunities, right? Like I felt, I don't know, there's not enough bands. I don't know who they all are. There's bands out there, but I don't know them. So let's figure out a way to get bands in. And then, you have like with Northtown, we definitely tapped on a couple of bands we knew and said, do this, so that it adds some credibility, some extra credibility. Not like people didn't know, but it wasn't strictly an underscore production. Like it was a team of people who came together to make this thing happen. Well, my cousins Saul and Jen own a summer camp called Camp Walden, which is near Bancroft. They've been running that camp for, I think, I'm gonna say 20 years, for a long time. And Saul a few years ago said, I'd really love to do a music festival here, when just at the end of camp season, once all the kids are done for the year, but before we close camp. And so, my cousin Toby and and Saul were chatting at Hanukkah one year, and Toby comes from like a production background, and he had done lighting for like Walk Off the Earth and some other bands around that level, and for a while, and has been working in some sort of like music production for like live production for a long time. And then me being on the kind of promotion and logistics side, and Saul having the venue, we were like, yeah, we can probably figure out how to make that happen. So we brought Saul really brought together another 6 people, and the 9 of us created this thing called the Highlands Music Festival, which is like an all in one. So like when you buy your ticket, you have access to all the concerts for, I think it's 3 days now. You sleep in the cabins on site. All of your meal is provided, and the big meals are provided in like the big camp hall. You can, play basketball or go canoeing or swim in the lake if it's still nice at the end of September. And then there's a main stage and a couple side stages, and it's more of an indie folk fest. But the first year I consulted on that and really helped, fill in any gaps from a festival production standpoint. And the last year I couldn't participate because I became a dad. And then this year I'm back trying to help, support in some new ways. So I still kind of get itchy if I'm not around music or in the festival space. I don't book any of the talent on this thing. Every so often I pitch an act, but Sammy who books the talent is of the right age, younger than I am, and of the right age for our audience to book bands. But like we had Dwayne Gretzky last year. We had Busty and the Bass the first year. We had Wild Rivers last year. So like we've still, like, she's booking some really really good stuff, and then a bunch of bands I have no idea who they are, which is awesome. But it's really fun to still again like take all of that knowledge that started in like the early underscore days and went all the way through Oktoberfest, to be able to then apply this, and not have to do kind of the not be in the festival director role, but more in like a support consulting education kind of role, which is fun.